all descended from Lucy at the time, and you know, and these people were getting in fights, at the thing, and it would say like DNA doesn't mean anything, it's wrong, it's just full of crap, because I can look at the bones and I can say this is how this has evolved over time, and so it's an interesting thing. And then what's interesting from that standpoint of view is that then a couple of I think in the last 6 months, they've actually said, well, maybe man did come from another source in Europe, and I don't know. This is one of those things where, I have to do a little bit more research on it, and I have to make sure that I'm not falling into some sort of nationalist, race baiting trap that this has happened, which is interesting, because we could all kind of fall into that, that we've all evolved from Europe. But, but it is interesting that, when we look at a lot of different things like the Denisovan people and Neanderthal people and things like that, it seems like realistically in a lot of ways that these groups of people are not what we want to think they are either. I mean, Neanderthal people really have, there's only been 50 bodies that have ever been found, and none of them are complete. But whenever they do find it, they find, burials. They've been buried. They're with burial gifts, and they did artwork and stuff. So they clearly were not caveman going around knocking people over the heads and stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, so they understood, and you've taken a look at some of the earway passages, and so they can say, well, these people can understand language. So, and they had the vocal cords to potentially speak language. There was no way of knowing that they did or they didn't. But, it's interesting to say that, we obviously mated with Neanderthal people, and because some of us have 5 or 6% Neanderthal DNA in our body. But so it is interesting that, A, that's true, and B, that most ancient cultures, even in Europe and everything like that, we're talking about very tall, hairy individuals that lived in the woods. I mean, and most people don't take that into consideration. I mean, you can look at some medieval prints from Europe, and they depict these hairy beings, and I guess we used to like to tie them up and burn them and stuff, but you
want your listeners to Google Nikolai, if I can say his name, Sergeyevich Valuev. He's a Russian politician and former professional boxer. Oh, yeah. And he looks like a Neanderthal with the deep set eyes, the big brow, the sloped forehead. Take a look at him. It's amazing.
Yeah, he's an interesting character, because I always thought, and he's a big, heavy set man too. And, and he's muscular. And I always thought not to poop in anybody's party, but, I always thought, if that guy had a mid-tarsal break, which apparently 10% of the human beings do, there's your problem, that's your issue. So, again.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
Time for you to be a teacher. Tell your audience what a mid-tarsal break is.
Well, what's interesting about the mid-tarsal break is that, and you probably could explain this better than me, but I enjoy the fact that you put me on the spot. But it has to do with the way that your foot flexes when you are in, when your foot enters into a walking pattern. So in other words, if you're walking along, rather than lifting up at the ball of your foot, right where your toes, connect to the ball of your foot, it actually is back a little bit. So obviously, whenever you're looking at your toes, then you've got the bones behind that are called the metatarsal bones, and so there's two sets of bones that go behind that. So the mid-tarsal would be in between the two set of metatarsal bones, and so whenever that flexes, that actually pushes into the ground. So whenever you're taking imprint or making a footprint cast. That's a lot of things. A lot of times that we look for those type of things because of the fact.
It looks like a pitch.
Yeah,
there's a little bit of a pitch.
Right.
Whereas with a human, you could clearly tell it's an arch.
Right. And so and I would imagine that's one of the ways that I think that a lot of people can, determine whether something is fake or you're being hoaxed or not, or at least the way that. Because I think in the old days when people used to like go out and make big feet and go out and just step into the ground, that you would actually have just a flat surface that was pushed in, so it would be equally distributed. So if you see an equally distributed footprint, that's got big splayed toes like that, just be aware that might be your buddy, playing a joke on you,
Yeah.
And whether anybody wants to hear that or not, but that's that. So, but that's one of those things. There are a certain percentage of people, human beings that have that characteristic, and and for a long time, that was one of the defining things that said, that humans don't have that characteristic. But
right, in your Facebook group, Night Dreams Talk Radio, I'm going to post a photo of a human foot with a mid-tarsal break.
Right.
So those that are listening and in your group can see this photo. Check that. There you go. Out.
Yeah.
So
some
humans have it.
Yeah. So far in the first hour, we've dashed a lot of people's hopes. And, but it's not. And the thing about it is that once you believe that you've seen it, that you are convinced that you've seen it. I mean, that's one of those things where, obviously you believe in the possibility of it. Now, what's interesting, now when we were talking before, you were telling me about your voice is a little bit hoarse because you had just gotten back from a camping trip. Now, what's interesting about that, where you were at, was that you went to what's called Beachfoot. Now, Beachfoot is a location that you kind of have to be kind of a well thought of Bigfoot person. So and that's a good thing.
Invitation only.
Yeah, invitation only. So therefore, all my friends get to go, but I don't.
Well, you could be my guest.
Well, I could be your plus one, but I think my wife would be invited in some regards. If
no, we'll send her shopping.
But we could. But I'm saying that if it wasn't for the fact that if she said, "Well, who are you going to bring?" and they said Kevin, and they would say, "Oh, maybe we shouldn't invite her after all." But but it is interesting that so this ended last weekend, and
yes.
How many times has this happened now? How many times have they done Beachfoot?
Beachfoot has been put on 11 times now by Todd Neese. He is the creator of the American Primate Conservancy, and he's based out of the Portland, Oregon area. And he's had quite a story, what he witnessed when he was in the military. He was blowing up some rocks with C4, which is a highly explosive element the military uses.
Yeah.
And him being in the Army, they were blowing stuff up, and when they went to go check out what they did, that's where he saw 3 Sasquatch creatures checking out what the heck that big boom was, and that changed his life. And so Todd Neese has been a major contributor to Bigfoot research over the years and wanted to create an event where Bigfoot researchers like Peter Byrne, Bob Gimlin, Ray Crow, the late Dr. Bendernagel could all come, hang out, hear the latest methods in research, the new discoveries, new techniques. And I was invited 5 years ago, and I will always go to a Beachfoot. It's the best place to go where you take Bigfoot seriously. And surprisingly, a lot of people are going to say, I don't take Bigfoot seriously. I do. And that's why I have my show, Off the Richter, where I make fun of the attention whores, hoaxers, and liars, and quote-unquote researchers who make YouTube videos. Because let's be real, either you're a researcher or you're a YouTuber. You cannot be both. Fact. One takes precedence for the other. In fact, you cannot make money off of Bigfoot. You can off of YouTube.
Yeah.
And that's one of my fundamental positions on why I created Off the Richter. And, you know, because I was on Bigfoot Bounty and I reached out to Todd Neese, he invited me 5 years ago, and it was medicine. Because if your listeners were listening from the very beginning of the show, I talked about the hate I received when I went on Bigfoot Bounty, that I needed to die of AIDS, how a copperhead snake needed to be thrown into my tent, et cetera, et cetera. The hate was overwhelming. And when I was invited to Beachfoot, it was medicine. Because there I am hanging out with Bob Gimlin. There I am getting to meet Peter Byrne,
Right.
you know, who's in his 90s now. And it was medicine. This is what Bigfoot's supposed to be. I get it. See, I was immersed for so long in the online Bigfoot world that I had never been to a conference or pretty much left my, roof. I pretty much did Bigfoot on Bigfoot Bounty and went back home. And by going out to Beachfoot, it opened doors for me. You know, I got to experience different points of view. For example, Joe Hauser, he's quote unquote on the woo side. Some people consider Ron Moorhead on the woo side. They're buddies of mine.
Yeah.
You know, I can be friends with the woo. We can find a common ground to agree on and be friends with, like we were talking about earlier in your show.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter what your positions are. We can still be adults and be friends. And Beachfoot, to me, is what Bigfoot's all about. It's not the online stuff. It's not the YouTube shows or the blog talk shows. It's about meeting people, developing relationships, getting to hear the latest. For example, Amy Boo, she is a part of the BFRO in Ohio, and she has teamed up with actual primatologists discussing the subject of Bigfoot and what it could be in regards to the ape family. And she had a huge presentation at Beachfoot this year, and we got to talk to these primatologists and hear what they're looking for with these creatures known as Sasquatch. It was fascinating. All these wackadoodles, me, you, Meldrum, onward, don't know what we're looking for.
No.
A primatologist who works with the apes at a zoo, at an animal foundation, whatever, will have a different perception on what they're looking for.
Well,
and that was fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, the movement, the curiosity. I asked, people say Sasquatch is curious. Is that the same with apes? And the girl, her name was Chelsea, she said, absolutely. Apes are always wanting to see what we're doing on our iPhones.
Right.
There's an example. The swaying motion from chimpanzees. A lot of people say they've seen Sasquatch swaying.
Right.
There's a lot of similar ape traits with this creature being reported.
Yeah, and I think that that's it is true. I mean, I talked to Joe Hauser last week, and I love Joe. He's got a very interesting perspective on things, but from my standpoint, but I'll tell you one thing, he knows his science to back it up. If he's saying that, this is one of those things that can happen, he's going to come up with something that says, well, this is what I experienced, or this is what people say they experienced, and this is why I believe that that's possible, and you can make your own conclusions. And so that's, I think that's totally valid to say that. Yeah.
Last year at Beachfoot, Joe Hauser showed me a photo of what someone had sent him of a Bigfoot. And I looked at the photo, and I can immediately tell it was a fabrication. And he says, why? And I said, look at the photo. The photo is highly pixelated. You can see all the little hundreds of squares. It was not high resolution, except for the Bigfoot face, which had no pixelization whatsoever. So the Bigfoot face was created from something at a different resolution and then added to the photo. Because if the photo is of low resolution, the entire photo will be pixelated, not just a certain area. And he's like, wow, I didn't know that. So I was actually able to help show him that, sorry, man, that's not a Bigfoot